Thanks, Paula. Yeah. Hello, everybody. How you doing? Good. All right. Well done. Choosing wisely on a Thursday night. Glad to see folks here in Tucson joining us for this reading in particular. And we're so thrilled to have this reading happening at the Poetry Center. And so I want to especially welcome the poets who are coming here tonight to be with us. And this includes Vanessa, Angélica, Villarreal, Roque, Raquel, Salas, Rivera, and Tes Souhaits, all writers who were ambassadors in the Poetry Center's Art for Justice project, and all of whom had to participate remotely when we were doing this project. And so we zoomed them in for these original readings, commissioned work from them, and they read for us, but through the rectangles of their computers, and we watched them through the rectangles of our computers. It's a big deal that they've chosen to be here, that we've been able to bring them all back in their corporeal forms. So a round of applause to poets who have traveled to be here with us. We are likewise absolutely thrilled to welcome back Diana Delgado, who's the former literary director here at the Poetry Center and who's done incredible work editing this anthology that, again, collects much of the work that was created for the Art for Justice project and more. It's just out from Haymarket Books. This is the second launch event following programs that happened earlier in March in Chicago at the Poetry Foundation and at Haymarket House, which houses Haymarket Books, which is the publisher of the anthology. Additional launch events are upcoming. So next week, the show goes on the road to the AWP conference, and there'll be launch events that happen there. And then later, there'll be events that happen in New York City at Poets House, and then likely even more beyond that. So if you're listening or zooming in from far away, and you're in LA or in New York, please join us for those programs or the others that will be coming up down the line. The topic of this anthology and of the Art for Justice project of Like a Hammer has never not been more germane to everyday existence than it is right now. But it is in bright relief in this moment with what I will call the spectacleization of asylum seeking and deportation, with a new onslaught of camera-ready scenes designed for political gain and for media clicks, and eventually for profit, and beyond any human dimensions that animate the moments that are buried right before our eyes. And I'm really grateful to the work of this book and to these poets in particular, especially in this moment, and for coming here to help share it with us. Before I welcome Diana up to tell us more, I want to keep everybody in the loop about some things that are coming up at the Poetry Center. On September 22nd, Saturday, 2 days away, Saturday, the Haiku Hike in downtown Tucson is happening at 9 o'clock. For folks that might want to do that, the haikus are judged by T.C. Tolbert, our Tucson Poet Laureate. For those that want to partake in that, it'll be walking along the route where those are posted. There's 20 pieces, a kind of chorus of Tucson voices. We'll be leaving at 9 a.m. from the Hotel Congress patio, and then exploring those together and reading them together along the way. It should be a great way to start a Saturday. Come join us if you like. Next up in the reading series, back here on April 3rd at the Poetry Center, we'll have a reading from Allison Deming and from Sally Ball, and we're really excited about that event. That's 7 o'clock back here on Thursday, April 3rd. And then on April 10th, we'll have former U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky coming back to Tucson to do a reading for us, also back here at 7 o'clock at the Poetry Center. Hope we'll see you on those upcoming Thursdays. One addition to the reading tonight is a series of film shorts that are based on poems either in the anthology or created by folks that are in the anthology. These have been commissioned by the Adrian Brinkerhoff Poetry Foundation, and Diana is one of the co-producers of these films. The same films are currently featured in a pop-up exhibit at the Poetry Center that will be up through the 29th of this month. And so as you see these tonight, if you're excited and thinking about what you've seen, want to explore them more, you can visit them again in the Poetry Center this week. They're on a continuous loop during our open hours, easy to see. And if you have any questions about any of that, ask me or check in with one of our librarians. We're really excited to be hosting that in the library space. Books are for sale, including this anthology that's just in the world. It's absolutely beautiful. It's an incredible piece of work. They're over here on my right. And so after the reading, if you're interested in purchasing books, there's also books by the poets that are here. Please come purchase those. I know that folks will be happy to talk to you, sign books, talk more about the work in this project. I'm going to welcome up and introduce Diana Delgado, who is no stranger to this spot. And so it's exciting to welcome her back to this space. Diana is a poet and advocate for social justice. Her work delves into community, resilience, and the lived experience of marginalized voices. She's partnered with a range of organizations, including the Clinton Foundation, the Coalition for Hispanic Family Services, This Poetry Center, and Hugo House, driving initiatives in each of those spaces that amplify underrepresented voices in the arts. Her terrific first poetry collection is called Tracing the Horse, and it was a New York Times notable new and noteworthy book. Her chapbook, Late Night Talks with Men I Think I Trust, won the 2015 Center for Book Arts Award. I mentioned her work just a moment ago, producing these films that we'll soon see this evening. And perhaps above all these things, I want you to join me in celebrating with big applause the many, many years of work that have built this anthology and brought it to life. It's been a huge effort. It's a beautiful book. It's a massive undertaking. Please help me celebrate Diana Delgado. Welcome back.
It's awesome to be back. Thank you, Tyler. I just want to acknowledge the moment that we're in, and that I've prepared this talk or sort of introduction to the book, but I want to acknowledge that much of what I would like to say will go unsaid. And the hope is that we can continue to lean into how we can best say the things that we need to in this particular moment that we all know is, again, I'm going to use the word unprecedented, but unprecedented and also dangerous. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's an honor to share space with you and the three remarkable poets who have traveled to Tucson, Arizona to help us celebrate the first of many launch events for Like a Hammer Poets on Mass Incarceration. It's important to recognize the special community that made this anthology possible through resources, attention, support, and guidance. My heartfelt gratitude goes to Haymarket Books and the entire team there, especially poet and editor at large Maya Marshall, Kima Jones at Triangle Literary, Kathy Cleric from Exchange for Change, who provides writing and communication-based learning to students incarcerated in South Florida prisons and jails. Tyler Meyer, and the entire Poetry Center team, including, with the highlight to Paula Valenzuela, who sat with me valiantly in the Poetry Center library one day as we both asked our ancestors to guide us. The Art for Justice Fund and the community openers for the Art for Justice Ambassador readings, Joe Watson, Reginald Wayne Betts, founder and director of Freedom Reads, and lastly, all of the poets who generously contributed their time, hearts, and minds to this anthology. Where I'm from, the town of La Puente in the San Gabriel Valley, we don't talk about trauma. We talk about the gloves the neighbor put on her son during his wake to conceal marks left by a rival gang. We talk about money and whether there's enough to allow my dad to attend his mother's funeral in shackles. We listen as brothers, one of whom entered prison at 15 and served more than a decade in the California Department of Corrections, wonder from one end of a phone line about an upcoming release and whether Home Depot hires felons. This anthology is deeply personal to me, not just as its editor, but as someone whose life and poetry has been profoundly shaped by the criminal justice system. My first book, Tracing the Horse, delves into the San Gabriel Valley of my youth, a place where many people I grew up with went to prison, spent time in prison, visited someone in prison, or might never leave prison. At 8 years old, maybe even younger, I found myself sitting in a holding cell alongside my mother and brother, arrested after my mother did something very benign, like sell weed or something like that, to undercover officers. And whether I realized it then or not, that moment marked by uncertainty and fear shaped my lifelong exploration of writing about power, resilience, and survival. This anthology emerges from that same urgency, the necessity to speak openly about our collective trauma, to acknowledge the realities of Black and Brown communities disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration, and to use poetry as a means of amplifying our survival and our resistance. Tonight, we are honored to hear from 3 key poets featured in this anthology, part of the 36 poets whose works appear in the book, 15 of whom are still behind bars. Roque, Raquel, Salas, Rivera's work is critical in tracing the origins of the carceral system, illuminating our increasing desensitization to ongoing injustices. Vanessa Angélica Villarreal's poetry, profoundly future-oriented, confronts detention centers that remain active and threaten to expand unless we understand and act upon their interconnectedness. Tes Souhaits' poetry vividly portrays the day-to-day realities faced by individuals navigating life outside incarceration, societal stigmas reflected in how we speak, dress, and fear, and fundamentally how we move through this world. The poems you'll hear tonight interrogate our flawed justice system, challenge us to envision a life beyond prisons, and affirm our shared humanity in profound ways. Through these poets' words, we're reminded that art isn't merely reflective, it's transformative. Poetry can and will shift perspectives, build empathy, and mobilize us toward more meaningful reform. This anthology, when I began it, was so confusing to me that I had no idea what to do with the hundreds of poems that I had to look through. And there was a moment when I could not figure it out because I had been reviewing all of these other anthologies. And of course, in a style that is, I think, just specifically mine, I said, well, I'm not gonna do it that way. And the publisher said at some point, well, that's how the anthologies work. And I said, no, this is gonna be a book that I'm going to ask everyone to read from beginning to end. You're gonna read it like a story, and it's a story about the America's carceral system. The anthology, intentionally structured to be read from front to back, mirrors the cyclical and perpetual nature of the carceral system. I organized it this way as I envisioned our circumstances coming full circle, culminating with one of the earliest and most painful historical abuses of the justice system, the execution of a young George Stinney Jr. The anthology also includes a study guide to encourage deeper exploration and conversation around these critical issues. And additionally, as Tyler mentioned, I co-produce films with the Brinkerhoff Foundation, films that are currently available to support and extend the dialogue surrounding mass incarceration. Tonight, I invite you not just to listen, but to allow yourself to imagine a future in which we replace bars and shackles with understanding, healing, and critical justice. Through stories and actions, we have the power to change our future. I want to remind everyone that we do not need to be experts. We do not need to have all of the answers at the outset, but we must allow ourselves to feel deeply for one another, which I believe is the true purpose of art. Thank you.
Right? Not bright. There's a lot more of y'all in here than when I sat down. First of all, thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you to Tyler, to Diana, to the entire team at U of A and Haymarket, to Vanessa and Roque and all of the poets that I got to be in this anthology with. It is a huge honor. It's a great honor of my life to be here with y'all today. And timing is always divine. I also want to thank Amy and Jean, directors and producers of those films that we just saw. They were great people to work with. I love them. I had all this stuff that I wanted to say, and all these things are just on my mind. This project, like Diana said, it's always been close, but it seems to be getting closer and closer as time goes on. It's like living in me. A close brother of mine's been incarcerated for 17 years, almost 18 years now, for a crime that he couldn't even have been in the place to commit, prosecutorial misconduct. We all know how that goes. But I want to take this moment to lift up Ricky Slaughter, free Ricky Slaughter. May he find justice. And I also am today thinking about Big U, who's been in the news. I don't know, some of you might have seen, but as a person who is just being alive has kind of made me a fugitive, right? Black people in this country have always been sort of illegal in some way or another. And it's very clear that Black and brown folks alike, as we try to collect each other and protect each other, there will always be forces to intervene and to try to disrupt that effort. And so I lift up Big U's name as well, as a person who has done nothing but try to lift the community and stop the cycle of gang violence in Los Angeles, and try to educate people about how the Crips came to be. You know, they were born because the Black Panthers were killed on national TV, right? Malcolm X and Martin were taken from us. And so a group of people decided that we should protect ourselves, and that the people here would never protect us if we didn't stand up for each other. And if y'all don't know, that's actually how the Crips came to be. So I'm gonna read this poem first. It's not actually in the collection. On Crip. On certain corners, cars circle ceremoniously, and couriers carry cake to circumvent cases. Classics and coupes constellate Crenshaw, Cary, Compton. Cobalt, chrysanthemums, candles, and champagne celebrate cherished companions, because comrades collaborated to counter crooked cops and corrupt civic commanders cannibalizing our cities, coloring us cancers. Courts, Congress, and CEOs conspired to confine citizens in coffins and cells like crack was contagious. Churches cried considering their children, the condition of their classrooms. Caught in a cruel, ceaseless cycle of crisis, Crip clenched circumstance. Crip cracked the cement chasing chicken and change in California, that concert of calamities. Crip cultivated the concrete, co-created a community of cousins, coalition come covenant, connected by the crimson chronicle of cotton, the collective choice to chase control coverless in the center of chaos. Curiously, commentary censors constructive critiques challenging common conversations about the culture of Crippin'. Contrary to contextless caricatures of combat and consumption, C-notes, chucks, and chunky Cuban chains, cartoonish canards of capos, sea-walking, and Cortezes, cognac, cocaine, and caskets, the code calls for care, coordination, courage. Character is critical. It's criminal how Crip been criminalized and commodified. Caliban of Calabasas, conscious of the cosmos's complexity, capitalism's chokehold and its charter, the clock's cold, constant counting, and the cramped capaciousness of counting. Crip crafted a coastline, a cartography of chances for the chronically cut off, creditless, convicted, and concurrent, constrained like chattel, clamoring for a cathartic conflict coupled to a calm chapter. A clean crib to chill in. Consistent checks, compassion, a cure for the cancer of civility. Cuz came correct, clutch curry, Coruscant champion, clear-sighted Caesar with cloth cerulean crown, confident, cunning, cutthroat for the conclusion of combat. Crumple the Constitution, Crip, cremate this colony. If tonight be my last, you can say I succumbed to my hunger. It was the state of my greed. Lazy, drooling, too focused on the tiny lazy drooling too focused on the tiny source of light to see the thing we all talk about swallow us both, me and the thing I fashioned into my escape. Why would any self-respecting slave grease his lips with freedom, salted and fatty, all for himself? If I get caught, bulleted to a footnote, they spotted me before I seen them. My ladder ain't reached, rung just a few shy of sunrise. The horizon, a mirror to my EKG. Spike, my torso clears another gate. Jump, razor wire cut my tricep a new smile. Short breath, 32 stitch lipped in that cold room, flat line on the record. No mention of how I learned a gun can make you a man's god. Women too. Some get off on exotic suffering, anything foreign. They are easy to rob. I don't feel guilty lacing my mattress with their blood money. Wrath. You don't get nothing for being nice. Stay dangerous if you want to stay alive. Here, it is dangerous to want to stay alive. If we die or die fighting makes no difference. When a pool of blood dries, it ain't no difference. My blood, theirs, both black as my daddy. My blood, his blood, I black just like my daddy. No man can raise his voice or hand to me. This tongue and rage were handed to me with merits and honor portioned in bullets. In war, honor is portioned in bullets buried with you or in your enemies. Buried within you are your enemies. You don't get nothing for being nice. This is the last poem I'll read. CCDC, South Tower, 6th floor. The fourth time you get locked up, nothing comes by surprise. Not the cop who rips out your piercings or the cold smell of piss in the holding cell. You already know how the phones work and who to call. You know to talk fast. You've seen sunshine seep through the receiver and leave a man drenched in his own grief. The fourth time you get locked up, you might try to pretend it's normal, like a long DMV trip. You might say things like, this happens to everyone, you know, who's black or brown. You don't waste time watching the door or pacing for warmth. You pull your arms inside your shirt and sit. You know you're gonna have to sleep. You know they're gonna keep you at least a week the fourth time. You know the slow gray beat of captivity. You done learned so well the rhythm is drumming through you like a pulse, so low you don't feel it keeping you alive. You're not picky about what food, because you know what choice you have. Take what you can. Trade strawberry cakes like rose gold bricks and choose coffee, fruit, a pill to help you forget. The fourth time they take you, you know the dry expanse of consciousness and the oasis of dreams. You know no one knows why they're here or when they will be called. You know don't come back is a jinx and never just an empty promise. You know silence is a word you can keep. Best to roll it up and quietly toss your blues. The fourth time they get you, you know well how society cages good and sick people and calls it just. How cages feel just like society to the people who fill them. You know we all find a way to live in our prisons. Thank you. Thank you.
Hola, hi. Wow. The poems I have in this anthology are about a large prison that was ripped down some years ago. El Oso Blanco, the White Bear, it's a very famous prison, and its construction. I currently live in Villarreal, which is right across from where it used to be. En las primeras décadas del nuevo siglo, Cenex se puso en marcha Pero en ese siglo Betún había cometido un delito digno de castigo, un robo de arroz y café, y una deuda de grano, ron y tierra. La justicia, siempre excelsa, le encontró a pie en el camino real, sediento de fuente. Y aunque en el artículo 1 quedaba prohibida la extracción de esclavos sin permiso real, el artículo 2.1 exceptuaba los sentenciados por los tribunales. Le transportaron ante aquel cajón de la zafra, con su estalactita pendiente, donde las guardias revisaban los reclusos, una detallaba los procedimientos y la otra los desvestía. La española con voz tallada explicaba mientras la gringa supervisaba la fila. Una repetía con tono compareciente y la otra los miraba con odio fijo y manoseo firme. La estructura en sí se debatía. El estilo neumudéjar, con su afán secular, contenía un corazón vacío de reforma, una gran plaza de ciudad española, sembrada de flores fugitivas. And I guess for context, El Oso Blanco was built by enslaved people and confined people, so it's a prison built by prisoners. In the first decade of the new century, Senex began their march, but in this bitumen century, they had committed a felony worth punishment, a theft of rice or coffee, or a debt of grain, rum, or land. Justice, always lofty, found Senex on the royal road, thirsty for a source. And although Article 1 states the extraction of slaves is prohibited within royal decree, Article 2.1 makes an exception for those sentenced by tribunals. They were transported before that crate of harvest, with its dangling stalactite, where the guards checked inmates. One detailed the procedures and the other handled undressing. The Spaniard with the carved voice explained, while the gringa supervised the line. One repeated a tone, appearing before the other with a fixed hate and a firm hand. The structure itself debated. The neo-Mudéjar style, its secular toil, contained a heart free of reform, a great plaza for a Spanish city, planted with fugitive flowers. La promiscuidad tan indeseable. En 1934, la inmigración del campo llevó a la formación de la corte nocturna para procesar de noche y de día. Los niños se enviaban a Mayagüez, las niñas a Ponce, las mujeres a Arecibo. Algunas pasaban por el Oso Blanco. Paula, empleada doméstica natural de Vieques. En el 1939, el primer caso de corrupción que llega a lo que se llega. Irregularidades en el manejo y desembolso de fondos. Irregularidades en la investigación del propio gobierno. Ese mismo año la cárcel se supera, la más moderna de su época. Pocos salen con oficio, pocos salen con sentencias más largas y el rigor. Ya para 1940 dejaron el afán reformista, pasan a donde sea posible, donde esté disponible, si se puede autosostener. El procurador general da informes al grano. Senex cumple su 6º año y se sabe que hay una guerra mundial. ¿Cómo se sabe de todo? Fuera de la norma, porque para los rumores de expansión de una nueva ala, entraba menos gente durante la guerra. También nada mejoraba, pero comenzaron a llegar más. Después se ganó o se perdió lo que se iba directo a la boca del oso, los delitos más graves, las sentencias más largas, y después de la guerra y durante la guerra, menos comida, menos ropa. Aún así dicen que por ser más grande era mejor. Ya ven que tienen Biblias y misa en el patio interior, la más moderna de la modernidad. El procurador general Enrique Campo del Toro, militar, humanista, autocrítico, sus palabras tan hondas como cualquier calabozo. El preso no se le reconoce calor humano alguno. Para recapitular, En nuestras cárceles, en nuestra cárcel, se hacinan de todos tipos de los delincuentes, todos viviendo en la promiscuidad tan indeseable. Cuando usa la palabra ocio, se refiere al tiempo. Según en general, existe un exceso temporal, un exceso táctil. Su solución es simple: aumentar los talleres, triplicar la producción. Las reformas aliviaban la promiscuidad, acompañadas por nuevas ilegalidades. Ahora jugar bolita y voleibol, ahora la paga por ciertos servicios no regulados, como ser de Loíza, nacido, criado y arrestado. Pasan las décadas, todos aumentan, todo disminuye. Una tal Helen Hooker denuncia la falta que le hacen en un mundo de faltas y fallos, pero dice algo común e increíble, que Senex no deja de repetirse de noche. Tremendo esfuerzo por tapar el cielo con la mano. El cielo con la mano no es imposible. Cada día las manos construyen cielos. El cielo es cosa de planificación. Pero si atrapas unas manos, aprendes a pescar nubes. Such undesirable promiscuity. In 1934, migration from the fields led to the formation of the nocturnal court to process night and day. Boys were sent to Mayagüez, girls to Ponce, women to Arecibo. Some passed through El Oso Blanco. Paola, domestic worker, originally from Vieques. In 1939, the first case of corruption that leads to what it does, irregularities in the management and disbursement of funds, irregularities in the government's self-investigation. That same year, the prison self-exceeds. The most modern of its era, few leave with new trades, few leave, with sentences longer and more rigor. By 1940, they quit all reformist drive, moving to wherever possible, wherever available, if it can self-sustain. The Attorney General gives no-nonsense reports. Senex spends his 6th year and knows there is a world war, like he knows about all things outside the norm, because expansion rumors have stopped. No new wing. Less people came in during the war. Also, nothing improved, but later came more. After it was won or lost, whatever went directly to the bear's mouth, the felonies more serious, the servings longer, and after the war and during the war, less food, less clothes. Even so, they say because it is bigger, it is better. You can see there are Bibles and Mass in the inner patio, the most modern of all modernity. The Attorney General Enrique Campos del Toro, military officer, self-critical humanist, his words as deep as any dungeon. The inmate does not recognize any human heat. To recapitulate, in our prison, all sorts, overcrowd, delinquents, all living in such undesirable promiscuity. When he uses the word idleness, he means time. According to the Attorney General, there is a temporal excess, a tactile excess. His solution is simple: increase the workshops, triplicate production. Reforms alleviated promiscuity, accompanied by new illegalities. Now to play pool, now to pay for certain unregulated services, like being from Loíza, born, raised, and arrested. The decades pass, everyone increases, everything diminishes, until one Helen Hooker denounces lack in a world full of lacks and failures, but says something incredible and common, that Senex keeps mumbling at night. A great effort to cover the sky with one hand. See, the sky with one hand is not impossible. Every day, hands build skies. The sky just takes planning. But if you trap some hands, you can learn to catch clouds. And I'll close with something from a forthcoming book, a trans-epic poem. Senex describe su origen según Ovidio y me ruega a mí, su musa, que le abra paso del presente para que pueda fielmente narrar las siguientes aventuras. Según la eterna transformación, nací el día en que un dios me violó en su patio, una playa llena de turistas. Fui una cartera desatendida y el tropel invasor de sombrías con piña coladas. Tras el robo, Poseidón no fue brusco. Al quitarme el nombre, Cainis me ofreció una piel impenetrable, un cascarón endurecido por disculpas y le contesté: el daño que me infligiste no tiene reparo, fructifico sus pesadillas de forma conectiva. Como compensación quiero ser reconstruido, parecerme menos a un objeto deseado para menos sufrir. Hazme hombre. Me queman las ansias de ser aguerrido y audaz capitán, peleando en la expansión febril de verborrea, asido a las filas del bando leal. Mis palabras se lanzaron del rezo, y al surgir la voz me fue irreconocible, su llamado varonil en la piscina vacía. Así llegué a ser Ceneo, un hombre mejorado, un hombre improvisado, un soldado que peleó más duro, más rápido y con menos que los anteriores. Leí que esta era mi génesis, un logro de coerción sacrificial. Las deidades contaban con escribas y bardos que nos pasaban canciones cuyas letras eran nuestras únicas palabras y cuyas memorias me eran desconocidas. Pero no recordaba aquella transformación originaria. Detrás de los asentamientos solo vislumbraba una barra con mi nombre, solo Cenex, una guarnición erigida en un mapa militar. Los turistas sí llegan y siguen comprando edificios para alquilarlos más allá de nuestro crédito limitado, pero no como lo cuenta Ovidio, pues si un cuento es muy heroico, no es nuestro. La historia no carga nuestras hazañas, que pesan como una maleta de estrellas. Amamos y morimos en el campo de batalla. Aunque acabe el combate, no regresaremos. No nos esperan las familias que nos olvidaron, y si por alguna razón salimos vencedores, nuestra gloria marchará vestida de pena y caminaremos juntos los heridos como si también tuviéramos heridas. Incluso nuestra narración es una guerra. No será para nuestros enemigos que narramos un nombre, su insignificancia, una rosa de la cual un poeta dijo daba igual si le decíamos mamey o perejil o hasta moon. Desconocides, hoy es nueva mi canción, el canto de una ternura férrea contra nuestro exterminio, que llega a cada baby para que sobreviva las purgas, la ciudadanía forzosa, la incorporación condicional, el vaqueo temporero enaltecide como cara pasquín y luego arrancade cuando se quiebra el cauce. Oh musa, mi lengua pesa porque mi canto es torpe, pese a que canto un banquete de lechos. Alabado el cable preñado de changos, alabanza para la Fiat Caprix, la cortatelas, las manos casquetas y los estudios de suelo, alabanza para las bocas que izan bichos tras el muro y para la sangre positiva, alabanza para el silencio algarabía, que estos son los trabajadores que crean un país movedizo. Canto por las mañanas, vistiendo a mis 30 besos sus cachetes y preparo sus almuerzos. Ojo, en los trenes nos apegamos demasiado a los hombres que viven seguros de que siempre lo han sido, a punto de robar las caras imberbes y drenar dones de sus ahorros. Somos implacables, rotativos, desarmadores en el agua, sirenos en los cayos, convidándolos a morir y a que se unan a nuestras formas imposibles. Y en mi joven vejez celebro que viví. Ya elegí la esquina donde soltaré mis cosas cuando esta piel se canse de cambiar. El sofá con polilla y la pantalla inservible. Una trayectoria invertida doy comienzo con la muerte. Les cuento que nací muerto y morí en vida, con mis amigues sosteniéndonos en apartamentos de renta empinada, no mascotas y no gente local. En una sala sin podar, descongelada la siembra, en bandejas de comedor repartimos los frutos. Y durante mi marcha fúnebre, comí tanta crica, escuché tanta mierda, chupé tanto rombo y fumé tanta bruma que me declaro lleno, aunque desmemoriado. De esos añicos bendecidos, reconstruyo un origen. Cainis da paso a Ceneo y finalmente a Cenex, con esta lengua que guías, oh musa, allende la historia oficial, para que yo les cuente cómo con fiebre cruzamos la transición para enterrar los huesos en carnes nuevas. So next, it's a trans epic. Should have said that at the beginning. Thank you so much for having me. De verdad, Diana y Tyler, thank you so much. Y Sin y Vanessa y todo el mundo. So next describes his origin according to Ovid and begs me, your muse, to open a path from the present so I can faithfully narrate the following adventures. According to the eternal transformation, I was born the day I was raped by a god in his backyard, a beach full of tourists. I was a purse unattended, and he was an invading horde of umbrellas and piña coladas. Following the theft when Poseidon wasn't rough. When taking my name, Canis, he offered me impenetrable skin, a shell hardened with apologies, to which I answered. The injury inflicted cannot be reset. I fructify its nightmares connectively. As compensation, I wish to be remade, less like an object you might want, that I might suffer less. Make me a man. I burn with the desire to be a brave and audacious captain, fighting in verbosity's feverish span, bound to the ranks of loyal troops. My words dove at the end of my prayer, and emerging, I didn't recognize my voice, calling out to the empty pool with manliness. I became Kaineus, a man improved, a man improvised, a soldier who fought harder, faster, and with less than any who came before. This was my genesis, I read, attained through coerced sacrifice. The gods had scribes and bards, passing down songs whose lyrics became the only words we knew and whose memories weren't mine. But I recalled no originary transformation. Past the settlements, I could only glimpse a bar with my name, only Sinex, a garrison erected on a military map. Tourists did arrive, buying buildings, renting them beyond our credit limit, but not how Ovid tells it, for if a tale seems overly heroic, it isn't ours. History can't carry our 5-star feats, because we love and die in battle. Even if the fighting ends, we can't return. The families that forgot us aren't waiting. And if for whatever reason we win, our glory will march wearing its sorrow and will wander among the wounded as if we ourselves were shot. Our telling is a war unto itself. For whom but our enemies do we narrate a name's insignificance? A rose, some poet said, could be mamey or perejil or even moon. Strangers, today I sing a new song, the canto of unwavering tenderness in the face of our extermination. May it reach every Sib, living through purges, being citizens, conditionally incorporated, temporarily backed, held up as a posterette, then torn down when the riverbed goes bust. O muse, my tongue weighs, cluttered, despite my singing a banquet of ferns. Praise be the wire pregnant with changos. Praise be the lining caprix and the cloth cutter. Praise be the soil studies, the hands for hand jobs, the mouths, the raised dicks near the seawall, and the positive blood. Praise be the algarabia silence, for these are the workers that build a shifting country. I sing, I dress my 30 for the day, kiss their cheeks and make them lunch. Danger. On trains we stand perilously near men who are sure they've always been. About to steal visages fallow and drain gentlemen of funds, we are implacable, rotative, disarming on waters, sirens on quays, inviting them to die and join us in our impossible forms. And in my elder youth, I celebrate having lived. Already I've picked the curb for shedding when the skin tires and finally settles, the moth-eaten couch and the broken screen. A reverse trajectory, my epic begins with death. For I was born dead and died in life, with my friends held together, despite apartments with steep rent, no pets and no locals. Living room unmowed, harvest defrosted, and crops served up on cafeteria trays. I gave in my mortuary procession so much head, sucked so many lozenges, listened to such shit, and smoked such a fog, I can claim to be full, even if my memory was shot. From those blessed shatterings, I reassemble an origin. Kindness gives way to Kaineus and finally to Sinex. With this tongue that you, O muse, are guiding beyond official history, so I may tell how we crossed transitions fevers to bury our bones in new flesh. Thank you.
Bruno, this is okay? How's everybody doing? Do we need a small break? Stand up, stretch. I recently threw out my back. I'm 43, so I need these moments myself. Thank you. Please take the moment to stretch out. All right. It's such a huge honor to be here tonight. I just want to acknowledge Diana one more time. We created this anthology during the pandemic in a time where we were supposed to be engaging in our communities. I had set up appointments to visit detention centers and advocate for detained juveniles, and that, so Diana helped me reach out to these communities. And my work literally would not be possible without you. Like the book that I wrote would not be possible without you, so thank you. I also want to acknowledge this moment and how Black, Native, and Latinx and Palestinian communities are connected through Mahmoud Khalil and Free Mahmoud Khalil. That is where migrants and natives and Palestinians are being detained together now. And I need to acknowledge that intersection in order to launch into my talk tonight. So, which of course means we're going to talk about Jon Snow. No, I'm not joking. Imagine, just for a moment, that the biggest, most watched television show in the world is set on a border. And imagine its hero is named after the land, but unable to claim any of it. His name is just Snow, a white field where an ancestry should be. He is a bastard, son of a nobleman and a mystery woman, and therefore a second-class citizen who cannot take his father's name, entitled to nothing, his lineage erased, barred from social mobility. So with no one and nowhere to go, he has no choice but conscription to a life patrolling the border, marked by a wall. I got it, okay. He's been brought up to believe that borders are just, that the wall is protective, and that the Border Patrol are a brotherhood of honorable men. But in his duty, he finds that his fellow officers are corrupt sadists, rapists, and murderers, and the people on the other side are not the enemy, but dispossessed indigenous refugees. Wildlings, descendants of the first men who, after centuries of separation and violence, now live in extreme poverty and danger. He has been brought up to hate his kin, made other by the political veil a wall becomes. The refugees are fleeing a global threat the whole realm denies. The memory of racial extinction at the hands of men embodied in the form of an undead king who brings climate change, with dead wildlings as his army, marching steadily toward the living. Whoops, oh, hang on. How does this work? Okay, so we can't use the, okay. What's that? I got the clicker. It's the scrolling. That's okay. Now imagine that this, the biggest, most watched television show of all time, airing this storyline at the height of family separations at the border, intended to make this statement. Fuck borders. Fuck Border Patrol, fuck militarized walls in apartheid states and empire, grant every indigenous refugee asylum, give them their land back as reparations. The memory of colonial violence will return to us in the form of climate change, mass displacement, and forced labor. Memory is the site of our collective survival. The land remembers. To remember is to refuse total annihilation. That show existed. It was called Game of Thrones, and that hero was Jon Snow. So why did critics collectively miss or avoid that reading? In order to examine the cultural forces that created the conditions for the global phenomenon that was Game of Thrones, it's important to situate it as a show that spanned the 2010s, with characters and plot lines that resonated rather than commented on the transition from Obama's two terms to Trumpism, neoliberalism to neo-fascism, mass shootings, Brexit, the alt-right white nationalist movement, Black Lives Matter uprisings, climate change, ICE, and the construction of the wall at the US-Mexico border. A major player in the era of prestige television, Game of Thrones' rich, complicated story became a global phenomenon with a universal appeal in a time when the monoculture was beginning to splinter into streaming niches. Perhaps the last truly universally loved show to air on television, its audiences spanned the political spectrum and defied age, race, gender, class, and borders. Endless cultural criticism and think pieces flooded the cultural landscape, scrutinizing Game of Thrones from every angle. I'm going to skip ahead here. But unlike Breaking Bad, Weeds, or Narcos, shows set on the literal US-Mexico border, Game of Thrones is set in a historical Western imaginary free from the baggage of race and colonialism. Instead of racial stereotypes, its heroes and villains resonate with our own identities through the metaphors of monarchs, monsters, and magic. Perhaps its explosive popularity lay in its ability to mirror our subjectivities: racialization, gender, class, enslavement, indigeneity, migration, fugitivity, disability, monstrosity, within the brutal framework of white supremacy. But Jon Snow is accidentally the best Mexican-American character ever written for television. I know, an absurd claim that I make only half-jokingly and because it's absurd. But as the seasons went on, I found deeper resonances with his character. Like every mestizo, he is a bastard, half noble, half erasure, unable to claim either lineage. Bastards are named after the land they are born on: sand, rivers, snow. As Jon Snow, he remains illegitimate and unclaimed by the Starks, and this nameless, no identity defines him. Despite growing up in relative privilege, he is a second-class citizen. His name, Snow, is erasure, amnesia. Having no house name means he has no place in history, and therefore he has no future. He will not be remembered. He belongs to the land. And as a second-class citizen, he has no choice but to become Border Patrol. Audiences had no problem grasping the wall at the edge of the North as a metaphor for the border, but the analysis never went past the structure, and the critique was always surface level, with murky walls are bad politics. In ecological readings, the wall is a metaphor for glaciers, the ice structures that hold off climate change, represented by the Night King and his undead army no one believes is real at the edge of the world. But in almost every analysis, the North is the site of the West's apocalyptic anxieties: climate change, the endless dispute for power bringing about nuclear winter, immigrant invasions. But few were able to parse the real-world allegory of the wall happening in real time: how borders are sites where climate collapse, mass migration and displacement, and the mobilization against empire become one and the same struggle. And who better to navigate this territory than a nameless, landless bastard conscripted to defend stolen land, a dispossessed person defending nobles' right to possess, a second-class citizen defending the ruling class, a border patrol whose identity crisis becomes a crisis of conscience. Like every traditional fantasy, Game of Thrones is a production of colonial, racial, and national imaginaries, where the story of the West, Eros, is centered and all other histories are minimized and marginal by design. In this view of the world, Latina histories, geographies, and bodies are subaltern, illegible, rendered as stereotypes, like Oberyn Martell. Jon Snow was never imagined as Latine or mestizo, but as a tragic Arthurian hero, an Aragorn with a trauma plot. His domain is the moral territory of power and war, a series of tests preparing him for his ascension to the throne. This is not the domain or the destiny of Latina characters. Latina characters are limited to colonial contexts: drug lords, revolutionaries, gangsters, maids, gardeners, parents, workers, lovers, struggling immigrants with a heart of gold and a supporting role. But Jon Snow patrols the physical and moral terrain of the border, and by depicting that structure with all the nuance and depth a heroic character requires, Game of Thrones accidentally portrayed the complexities and complicities of borderlands' mestizo identity. A Hollywood depiction of a son of immigrants becoming border patrol might zoom in on his guilt, the suffering of migrants, appeal to audience empathy with unambiguous morals, the trap of representation. But the whiteness of Game of Thrones allowed us to see the wall stripped of its political stigmas and racialized contexts and see it for what it really is, a projection of narratives. In 2016, the Border Patrol Union opened its podcast called The Green Line by playing the oath taken by the Night's Watch in Game of Thrones. The end of the oath says, "I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of men." In Border Patrol's interpretation, the realms of men they guard are ostensibly the United States and Canada, while the land beyond the wall, at least according to the lore, is the land of all that is not human, the others, the White Walkers, the dead. In our world, the wall separates humans from the socially dead, the violent animals of MS-13, according to President Trump, dehumanizing all migrants as other monster hordes of socially dead. In summer 2017, the final shot that concludes Game of Thrones season 7 finale is that of hundreds of thousands of undead whites walking through a breach in the wall, a colossal ice structure protecting the northernmost border of Westeros from a great evil in the wilds beyond. It is a terrifying, cataclysmic finale meant to fill the viewer with abject dread, and it does. The wall was the only thing standing between Westeros and the violent, mindless, ever-multiplying dead. Once the mindless hordes cross over, no army will be able to stop them. Everyone will die and rise again as one of the dead. On October 12, 2018, 1,000 Central American migrants were forced to leave San Pedro Sula, Honduras, and walk to the United States. Leaf rust, a fungal plant disease spreading rapidly in the warming temperatures, was on its 7th year of devastating the region's coffee crop. Small farms lay abandoned in the countryside, some to migration, others to violence, all to climate change. Indebted farmers were violently dispossessed or disappeared. Once predictable seasons lost their patterns. Without rain, there was no harvest, no work, nothing to eat. Displaced indigenous farmers became climate refugees, left their parents. Pregnant women left with children in tow. Over the next 2 months, the caravan swelled to more than 7,000, surviving Mexican state and cartel violence along the way. After walking more than 2,500 miles across the span of Mexico from one ocean to another, they arrived in Tijuana in early December, along with the winter. In response to their arrival in Tijuana and their denial of asylum at the border, that following January, President Trump tweeted a graphic based on the Game of Thrones tagline, "Winter is coming," styled in the show's signature font. But instead, it said, "The wall is coming." Although Latinas are rarely, if ever, present in fantasy imaginaries, fantasy is inextricable from Latina immigrant lives, forming the language, symbols, technologies, and policies of far-right anti-immigrant actors. Peter Thiel, billionaire tech investor and Trump advisor, named his mass surveillance companies used by U.S. Customs and Border Protection and ICE after magical Lord of the Rings artifacts. Palantir, a data mining and visualization company, is named after the Palantiri, the 7 seeing stones, a network of crystal balls used to telepathically gather intelligence and surveil Middle-earth. Thiel's latest company, Anduril, is named after the sword reforged from the shards of Narsil, the sword Isildur used to cut Sauron down and wielded by Aragorn, king of Gondor and Isildur's heir. The runes inscribed on Anduril read, "Sun, I am Anduril, who was once Narsil, sword of Elendil. The slaves of Mordor shall flee from me. Moon. Anduril is the maker of solar-powered surveillance towers that run day and night along the US-Mexico border. They are tall, thin steel poles with mounted cameras sticking up from the landscape like swords." The US-Mexico border wall itself is a fantasy. It is the fantasy of the white ethno-state and the fight against cultural and hemispheric rupture, surging with racialized, laboring bodies, desperate to invade. Any border reinforced by a wall is a site of race-making, nation-building, resource hoarding, wealth extraction, and temporal dislocation. A narrative site where difference is produced through language and violently maintained by the fantasy of shared identity. For John, the violence required of him to maintain the wall rested on his identity as a man of Westeros, a fantasy of belonging that would only ever see him, a bastard, and a man of the Night's Watch, as a second-class citizen, unworthy of title, land, or family name, and therefore any lineage or inheritance. Futurelessness. The Night's Watch merely deputized him to maintain that fantasy with the invention of power over the wildlings, power he wielded from the fantasy of belonging to a nation, an identity that under scrutiny falls apart once he realizes he has more in common with the dispossessed on the other side of the wall. And that delusion of belonging, despite marginalization and alienation, that striving to be from a lineage, a homeland, a tradition with ties you cannot claim and that will not claim you. The name Snow that represents ancestral amnesia. The wall that maintains the fantasy and the complicity in its violence, and the slow process of disidentification with nation, borders, its wealthy families. That is a heroic Borderlands Latina story I've never seen on any screen. Game of Thrones is not a Latina Borderlands show, but its resonances are. I don't mean to give Benioff and Weiss undue credit. Rather, I intend to make legible an experience and perspective that are constantly rendered illegible in popular culture. How could a fantasy world like Westeros, so culturally and temporally removed from our post-colonial world, possibly be an allegory for the US-Mexico border or have Latin American migrants in mind? I'm not saying it did. But the answer, I think, lies in the collective unconscious, in the images it renders, in its geographies, its symbols, its others, its imagination. George R. R. Martin might have based A Song of Ice and Fire on English history containing allegories of the War of the Roses and Hadrian's Wall. But he has also lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, since the 80s, mere miles from Diné territory. Just as Tolkien, an Oxford medievalist writing at the height of an immigrant surge from the West Indies, could not help but reproduce the post-colonial world and its races in Middle-earth, so too is Martin's imagination informed by the US-Mexico borderlands and its colonial constructs. He cannot help but reproduce its racial geographies. The North, like Santa Fe, is not just a borderlands, but a territory of overlapping histories. The children of the forest, the first men, the Andals, the Starks, Westeros, the Wall, Diné, Yaqui, New Spain, Mexico, New Mexico, America, the border, overlapping maps caught between empire and indigenous memory. The US-Mexico border cannot be reproduced as realism in any story without also reproducing its affects or its feelings, deeply held biases, racial constructions, fears, narratives, rhetorics. Fantasy decontextualizes its stigmas, detaches it from the anchors in our world so that only symbols remain. This is why Trump and Border Patrol respond viscerally to the wall as a symbol of security and apartheid, a lure for a story that contradicts our assumptions. It is precisely because of the show's whiteness, its cast, characters, setting, and its allegorical framing in European history that such a radical geography could even be rendered on television, much less its political discourses. In Game of Thrones, fantasy allows the world a certain level of decontextualization, where allegory distances as it compares. Game of Thrones' whiteness empties the body at the border of their racial contexts, stripping the wildlings from any association to migrants from the global south as a faceless brown mass, who are at best seeking a better life, and at worst, invading our country and breaking the law, and either way, a source of cheap labor who will take advantage of social programs. Let's assume the representation of Latina people was the furthest thing from Martin's or Benioff's and Weiss's minds. As a piece of visual culture, Game of Thrones is a representation of Western power, rendered in the discursive and imaginative spaces of the fantastic. But it is also a product of the post-colonial imagination, reconceiving history through the filter of colonialism and race. So what can a fantastic rendering of the past tell us about power today? Since fantasy is a direct line to the realms of the symbolic and the imaginary, it turns out it can tell us quite a lot. This is the power of fantasy. The ability to build worlds rendered historically neutral by whiteness, unburdened by the baggage of representation. Once the audience is transported to Westeros or any medieval Western imaginary, unbound from white guilt and the politics of representation, viewers' guards come down and are at ease and attention, receptive to the Trojan horse that is a beloved character's radical politics, subjectivities, and identities. Jon Snow, for example, can denounce the Border Patrol by leaving the Night's Watch and grant all migrants asylum by giving the wildlings their land back. Someone just needs to interpret that reading afterwards. And I'll stop there. Thank you, Jon Snow, and thank you, George R. R. Martin.
Vanessa, Roque, Sin, Diana, thank you guys so much. One more big round of applause. Books are for sale over here, am I right? I hope you'll come and spend some of your dollars over there. And then we hope to see you again on April 3rd for the reading back here at the Poetry Center. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you again soon.